Thank you. Just before starting, a show of hands, how many of you have ever pen tested medical devices? Cool. How many of you have pen tested hospitals? All right, awesome. This talk is going to be more on the protocols that the medical devices work on. Uh, I'm sure the people who pen tested medical devices, did you look at the protocols that they were working on? Or it was just Windows? Okay, cool. One guy. Okay. This talk will help you to understand more of the data that you were looking at, the kind of attacks that you can do. Possibly you can take down devices, and a lot more than devices. All right. Who am I? I am a student at Northeastern University. I used to work with Philips Healthcare in the Security Center of Excellence group. I code occasionally, and these are the communities I'm a part of. I speak at conferences, and I handle these Twitter accounts. I'm not that active on social media, so if you drop me an email, that is actually the fastest way to get in touch with me. Uh, this is going to be an agenda for today. We'll talk about security in hospitals. We'll talk about what is HL7 2.x. We'll do a crash course in the protocol, and then we'll understand how do you attack other devices. Uh, just a warning, if you're doing it if you're pen testing medical devices, do not do them on a live environment. So if you're inside of a hospital and you're doing a pen test, tell them to isolate the environment because these scans or these things will take down devices. They can also disrupt the functionality of other devices that are not actively connected to it. Like they will be connected to the same network, but you might not be testing them, but you can crash other devices using this protocol to them also. So be a little careful while you're pen testing these devices. We'll talk about fuzzing these protocols, and the reason why I wanted to cover fuzzing was because most of the vendors or most of the protocols, most of the ways that you fuzz HL7 2.x is not the optimum way. And I'll talk about why and how people tend to attack them. And then the last part is just defending it. And I'm sure we're not that worried about that. All right, so let's talk about securing hospitals. So if you look at hospitals, there are devices, there are networks, there are protocols, and there are patient records. These are the terms that we will be using. Just remember this guy over here, which we called EMR, EHR. Where is that? My point. Okay, just remember this guy. This guy is like the center of the hospital system. All the patient database, anything that goes into the hospital from your patients or records, from your doctor's machine, is fed to the EHR or EMR. I do another talk of finding EMR, EHR, and it's really, really easy if you use Shodar and Census to hunt these systems. It's like one of my favorite hobbies to do at the weekends, like just find these. We're going to be talking about this guy over here, and there are other protocols also that run on hospitals. Uh, we will talk less about patient monitors or X-ray ultrasound. You can actually draw out conclusions from my talk, and if you have any doubts, just reach out to me. For those of you who do not know about medical devices, this is how a medical device looks like. It's not something really obtuse or abstract. Most of the medical devices are stripped down versions of commercial OSs. So if you have a MRI machine, or let's say you have a CT scan machine, it'll be like Windows XP or Windows 7 or Windows 10, and then you put in IIS over it, and then you have services, and then you package it as a medical device. Same goes for small devices like patient monitors. They will have stripped down versions of Linux. You'll run some proprietary OS over it, and then it's not proprietary OS, but proprietary softwares over it, and then you'll connect it with sensors, and these can be huge. So I remember doing this I was testing one of the CT scan machines. It had 4 components which were driven by Windows XP, which is really, really cool. So again, yes, these are all operating systems that you know. Most of the vendors, what they do is they say that it's a proprietary OS and we will not give you any information. That is the time when you dig in, use Nmap, and you'll realize that it's Windows NT or Windows 2000, whatever. Uh, so that's it. Uh, Now, what does this tell us? This tells us that if you look inside a hospital or an operation theater, these are the CPUs that are there. So these are off-the-shelf components that you can attack, right? So there is one way of attacking these devices is attacking the OS. Like if you have vulnerabilities with Windows XP, Windows 7, the FTP server as such, so you can attack them. And I would say that these are more like system security that you would be doing. The other part of it is HL7 2.x. And what is it? HL7 stands for Health Level 7. It's an association for, or it's a, what do you call it? It's a, uh, it's something like W3C is. They create standards for medical devices and interoperability. And so you can read through it. In a nutshell, this means HL7 is everywhere. So you have the EHR, and remember the EHR. This is like our honeypot. This is connected to everything that's there in the hospital, right? Which means if you can take this guy down, you can do a lot of stuff. And we'll realize that how do we take HL7, you know, use it as a tool to attack these devices. So at one of the demos, I'll show you how to take down all of these at a time. But I don't have videos, but just draw conclusions out of it. Okay. Let's understand what HL7 looks like. So HL7, these messages run on TCP/IP. So it's a plain raw socket which starts with a vertical tab, which is OX, hexadecimal B, and then you have all your segments. This is clear text. So that is the reason when you're pen testing hospitals, you can get gigabytes or even terabytes of data in a day. In one of our exercises that we did, and I create virtual environments for myself to test devices, we were taking dumps through Wireshark over the network, and it was around 2 gigabytes of traffic per minute, right? So which is huge. So you really need to understand on what device you're targeting and what kind of protocol that you're looking at, so that you draw conclusions out of it. So this is what you need to understand about the HL7 protocol. The other thing is the messages. This is the delimiter between the fields. This means space. This is the header which every message starts. And then you have the message types. And we'll see what these messages types are and why are we talking of them right now. All right. The next 5 minutes will be a little boring, so just bear with me if you're not finding this boring. So this is the first message that I'm worried about. This is called the ADT message, which is admit, discharge, and transfer. Do not worry about the text right now. We'll see how to make sense out of it. Like in 2 minutes, we'll be able to make sense out of it. And I'll just skim through what is the significance of the message and what do you do when you see this message, right? So this is responsible for admit, discharge, and transfer, like we know. This contains PII, and that is really important. So if you have a client in Europe or US, they will be really concerned about this information glowing clear text on hospital networks, right? And this happens on most of the hospital networks that I've seen. In hospitals in US and Europe would fine you, would get fined by the government for this. If you talk about countries like India or China, they won't. It's like they don't enforce stuff. So yeah. So what can you do about with these messages? You can actually, it really depends on the conducted infrastructure. You can actually inject JavaScript onto it because of the nature of these messages. So it's more like, just remember this diagram. So you have a doctor's terminal which has a web client running over it, and you have a patient monitor where you can inject these payloads. You just need to hijack that stream, right? And we'll see how do we hijack that stream and why this stream can be hijacked. So there are multiple entry points. So when you're talking of ADT, just remember that you can target doctors, you can target their terminals with it. Okay, second is the ORM message. This is probably one of the important messages. If you're lying on a patient bed in an ICU, this message would be sent really, really fast. So it contains all your vital readings. No, this is the ORM. Okay, so this is actually the order message. So this is used for targeting other infrastructure. So if your doctor has told you to get an X-ray scan, this guy will actually give that message forward. The next, and it has these uh, X-ray ultrasound, and it can be used to fingerprint more devices. ORM is when you're lying on a patient bed. So ORU, sorry. So if you hijack the stream and you change your vitals over this guy, this is scary. So it has like respirations per minute and stuff like that. So this contains information like oxygen levels, heart rate. The potential entry points is the RDX or OBX. This is the pharmacy order message. I'm sorry for making it really boring, but we'll see demos after this. But this is important if you need, when you refer to these slides and when you look at, pen testing hospitals, this is what you need to refer to. So this is used. So this message is sent when you need to dispense medicines. So some countries have machines that can dispense medicines, and if you probably want to see if you can get access to other drugs, you can try changing this message, right? And so again, this contains information on providing medicines, pharmacy information, medicine dosage. In the US, it contains information of the provider also. So again, that is also sensitive message that you can use as a proof. And then you have medical document management. This is important because it serves, the way it's written, it's a legible document that serves a comprehensive account of all healthcare services provided to a patient. All right, so this is the last message is the financial transaction, and this is it. Okay. Now we'll see demos. And viewing these messages, let's start with actually viewing these messages. So this is a tool that I use. This is called Smart HL7 Viewer. It's a really, really good way. It's a really good tool. It's free, and I would highly recommend to use that because I've used other tools. These are not as intuitive as this guy. So let me just show you a message. So let's talk of the ADT message that's there. All right. So this is interesting because now I can actually see the message that it's supposed, that's the way it's supposed to be. So it has information, patient information. It has information about your race, patient address, patient account number. It has access to your allergy, the kind of diagnostics that you have, and the event management. So why is this important? Because it goes clear text on a hospital network. And you can hijack this, and the reason is that there's no checksum on these messages. So you can hijack them or replay them and then change information. So you can register new patients. It was fun doing it on an emulated environment because you could just register any patient and then change their diagnostics, and no one would know because most of these devices would not have logs. So which was bad. On the server side it had, but on the client side, like the small monitors do not have logs all the time. So the old ones, if you're pen testing these devices, will not have logs. So even if you were able to crash it, no one would know. Right? This was a big challenge in the US. About 2 years ago, they released a report where 100,000 of patient monitors, they said that 100,000 patient monitors were deemed unusable, and no one knows why, because they could not investigate the root cause of it. There were no logs. Again, let's look at some of the other messages that these guys have. So let's look at RD. This is my favorite message. Why? Because it has a ton of information. So it says that, this is the sending facility, this is the processing ID, it has your patient information, and it has much more than that. It has something like, it has information on your patient visit and your diagnostics. So if I could find that. All right. So if you see this says nursing unit, and then it gives the information of this lady who was supposed, I think she's referring doctor. So if you get access to these messages, the point here is you get information to much more than patient data. because this kind of information, so these messages will have information on your referring doctor, the kind of diagnostics that you had, and probably much, much more than that. It depends, really depends on the way these messages are crafted. And then you have RXR, which is basically that, what kind of medication are you on. So if you change all of these segments, let me show you how these messages look like. These look like this, absolutely this. So you can, this is what goes on the hospital network. So this is how you view these messages. But the problem, I believe, is how do you find these messages? So the way you can do this is capture something using Wireshark and then use this. So let me show you how Wireshark looks like. Wireshark trace. So I have this guy over here. So this is a really small scan, small trace. This is probably for about 10 or 15 seconds. If you run it for an hour, I mean, there is an incredible amount of data that you can get. And I would recommend, if you're doing a pen test and you're taking a network tab, use a proper network tab and use a dedicated machine which has at least 16 gigs of RAM, and try use Linux. I like, just a suggestion, try use Linux and just dump all the information onto a hard drive and then analyze after that, because you'll be dealing at least with gigs of data. So this is what happens. So I know this is my environment, so I know how it works. So it's on the 8, and if I go and I follow the TCP stream, it'll show me information just like that, right? So copy all of this information, paste it in HL7 viewer, and you'll be able to make sense out of it. And this is like the first step what you do when you're pen testing. All right. So, but again, the problem is, how do you find there are HL7 ports? Because this is what will happen. If you've pen tested HL7 ports, and I'm sure people have done that, you would find this. And this is a very common behavior, because Nmap will say that all of these ports are unknown. And why is it? Because these messages can actually run on non-conventional ports. So I'll show you one of the Nmap scans that I run. Now, let's start talking about the recon part of it. I did this on my own lab. If you're pen testing medical devices, do not run an intense scan whatsoever. Because some of these devices can actually crash with an Nmap scan, and you won't believe so this was a report that I read in the US. Someone pen tested an X-ray machine, and the machine crashed because of an Nmap scan, right? So a slow comprehensive scan would work. Now just look at this. It says port 555 open, 139, 8082, and 9001, and I'll move it to the end. And if you see that this is how a scan would actually look like. It says Tor port 8082 is black ice, and then it would say 912 and VMware auth and stuff like that. Now, this is really common, and the reason is that Nmap really doesn't understand that these ports are, I'm running a service here, but Nmap doesn't get that, right? For them, it's the conventional ports that matter. So it's more like Tor port is what it detected, and then 8082 is the black ice, whatever that protocol is. And if you run more ports, it'll detect some other garbage information. Now what you do is, you actually start to brute force and look at what ports are they and how do you make sense out of it. So this is a tool that I wrote. I actually wrote two tools. One of them is more hacker friendly, where you can just give it arguments. The other one is a little really easy. So let me just show you how it works. So this is a tool that I wrote. So this one is guided mode. So you just tell it to scan an IP, and it'll scan for the ports. The way it works is it starts sending deformed packets, and sometimes it sends in really good packets and waits for acknowledgement from the server. So the way it will work is It'll send a message and then it'll look at the packet and the kind of response that was sent. And if it finds it to be useful, this guy would actually say that, you found a port. So I said, uh, this is the IP address. Now, when I said that this is the IP address I want to target, it can send 2.x ports, which it'll do is it'll start brute forcing. So it'll start sending messages. The best hack that I find is it'll send a small case MSH message, which is basically this guy over here. If you send this guy, some of these protocols actually get confused, and they respond by saying that, I do not understand this message, but I can accept ADT, ORU, and all these messages. Can you send a response in this format? And which is very easy, which solves your problem. So this is the way that this tool also does that. So it'll just start scanning. I say scan for IP ports, and it'll start scanning. Okay. So earlier, what happened was I used to run all of this I used to show all the messages, and it used to get messy because if you need to scan 65,000 ports, it doesn't work. So this one just scans and gives you the results. So it detected that there's a message received on 8082, and you can actually search for other ports also. And I will search for other ports. No, I won't. Okay. So now it says that, do you want to scan for message types? Do you want to scan for message types with this port? And this is the response that I got. So whenever you see a response, it's usually, if you see an AA, this is an acknowledgement. If there is not an acknowledgement, that is usually a NAC, N-A-C-K. Now, if you see this over here, so it's detected ORU. Now, another important part of it is that even if you have one IP and if you have same port, it can accept multiple types of messages, or it can accept multiple ports can accept different messages. So you can have like an admit on one port, a discharge, no, not a discharge, an ORU on the other, and ORM on the third part. Right? So this is what makes these things tricky. So this is how you do a recon. So let's talk of common attacks. A fun fact that we realized that most of these messages are clear text, right? Which means if you find a port, you can do a man-in-the-middle attack, and you can change all of these messages. Right? And this is not even the problem. The problem is that you can actually crash devices using this. Right? So this is one of the products that I found. What happens is they did not establish any trust over each other. So they were just sending rogue messages. What I realized that you can actually broadcast over a port and then force the other guy to accept all of the junk that you send. So you can actually send junk data, and it'll just keep accepting it. And this was because of unvalidated size. So HL7 by definition does not validate a size. This can lead to a buffer overflow attack, and I'll show you how it's done. So if you see over here, so just to give an background, what is happening is there's an IP running over here, which is accepting HL7 messages. Usually these messages look like this. So there is a receiver. This is a virtual environment that you can play with. This is called Happy. This guy is receiving messages, and you would send in messages. And you would send in messages. Okay, this guy is receiving messages. You would send in messages using this guy, and you would get an acknowledgement back. Right? This is a clear flow. But if you send in something like this, it'll still accept it. The reason is the header, MSH header over there is intact. Right? It won't make sense out of it. So you can see that it says AA. Right? It won't make sense out of it, but then you can feed garbage data into it. Right? The moment that you malform this header over here, this you didn't get an acknowledgement. This is an acknowledgement. This is not the acknowledgement that you were looking at. So how do you crash devices? So can anyone think of a way to crash a device? This exactly, and this goes in two ways. So how does it go two ways? Now let's understand over this guy. So it's not just the client that can attack the server can also attack the client. And the reason is that your client is actually receiving these messages and processing that. And this is a really fun attack that I'll show you if I have that. So most of these systems sends a message and waits for this AA message. If it doesn't get that message, it'll send it again. All right. So the problem with this kind of situation is, if by any chance I block that port which is sending back the acknowledgement message, your patient monitor will keep sending the same message, right? So let's say you have a blood pressure of what's the normal blood pressure? Yeah. So and the patient monitor is giving that reading. Someone pulls out the patient monitor, or the patient is getting blood pressure falls down. If your patient monitor does not get acknowledgement back, and this is what we'll see, this is what it actually looks like. Something like this. If it gets acknowledgement like this, AA, which is a blank message, it'll keep sending messages again and again. So and this was a hack that was demonstrated. It's just scary to show these kind of hacks, so I don't do that. But the point is that if this guy is sending you messages back, your patient monitor will not honor that. So it will just keep sending all of these messages, and something bad can happen. So this is how you actually. I'll show this. How. Okay, this is a DOS attack. I'll show you a DOS attack later. Just wanted to show you a crash. I'm showing this crash earlier. Okay. So what is happening is that this guy, so what is happening over here is this guy over here, this guy over here is, so this guy is on an attack mode. What it means is I'm sending a very large buffer. And I know this, that the other device will crash because I'm running that application. So do not do this on a live environment. I cannot, so the thing is that I sent this AAA, which was very, very big. It was actually bigger than what I showed right now. And I got a socket error. On the other side, that guy actually crashed because it was not able to hold that memory. And you'll see these examples a lot, like a lot. I cannot stress this more. The other thing that can happen is, what if this guy from the other side starts attacking you? So I sent an ADT message perfectly normal. Now, sometimes, like this is again a message. Now sometimes you get something like this. This is I was running a malicious server. I was supposed to receive a normal acknowledgement, but this is what you get, right? So if you have access to hospital networks, do try to change the acknowledgement message and attack the other connected infrastructure, right? But be very sure of the impact. Like if you change this, it'll reflect across all of the devices on the network. So if you're able to do this over a hospital network, this is a sure shot DOS, and you can actually take down the entire operation. because every device will look for an acknowledgement back and they will not get any. Right? Some of the devices which are vulnerable to buffer overflow will have A's on them. Right? Is it being abstract, or like why is so much silence? Is it really boring? Okay, shocking. Okay, all right. Let's talk of more bugs. So let's see an actually let's see an. I'll just show you a whole DOS attack, and this is a very logical DOS. If you have access to this EMR system, this is how you would actually hijack all the streams and crash everything. Uh, okay, so what is happening right now is, and you need a little context to understand this. This is my IP 242.1. There's a server running on this machine, right? So this guy is receiving messages on port 10,200. I send a message, which is an ADT message. I get a reply, all right? Many of these, in this scenario, you'll see many of these devices communicate over the same port, right? So there is always a time sharing mechanism in place, or sometimes there is, you like it just accept messages in the way they come. And we can exploit this kind of scenario. What I do is I send that kind of a message that we saw earlier to it. So if okay, so this screen, if you could see that this guy over here had actually DOS written. So if you come closer, you'll see. So what I'm doing is I'm sending A's in really large quantities, and because they are syntactically correct, the guy is trying to process all of this. And this is a big server that we are talking of. This has like something which you would use in a hospital. So this script is just there. It's sending this big payload time and again. I send another message, and now you can see that the response time that I get becomes less. I spawn another shell, and now what I'm trying to do is send another payload. All right. So now what will happen is it'll start sharing the resources with these other threads, this guy over here. And if I spawn more shells like this guy over here, this guy will ultimately just starve. It'll be a kind of a race condition where this guy, not a race condition, I don't know what condition is that. This guy will actually not get any resources. That is what will happen. So I just need to spawn 4 shells, because 4 or 5 shells, because I know the kind of streams and I've configured that this guy can handle only 4 streams. If you talk of bigger hospital systems, you can just run 5 threads or 6, 7 threads, and you'll be able to take down most of the streams. Some of the hospital systems are really, really big. They have cloud infrastructure, so you will have to spawn in many shells. But again, essentially what will happen is you'll be able to understand that there are many streams, and you just need to hijack all of them. Just don't release the streams. That is what happens. So in the end, you'll see that this guy just starves out. So I'm not getting a response after these. All right. Sure. All right. Let's talk of fuzzing. Yes. Did anyone say anything? Okay, I thought someone said I had a question. Okay, let's talk of fuzzing right now. Most of the vendors that you'll see offer fuzzing as for HL7 protocols. And in my experience, none of them work. The reason is you have a payload which is something like this, all right? You need to understand the kind of fields that you're fuzzing, right? And that has to be very, very specific. So if you're fuzzing this field, it just your first parameter has to be here. Instead, the vendors would actually send you this, all right? So you need to keep your payload really, really specific, and you really need to understand what kind of system that you're attacking. And that, in my opinion, is the fuzzing that you want. Let me just show you. So if I wanted to fuzz, let's say the address field, right? And I know that this can be fuzzed. So what I'll do is I'll actually go to my HL7 viewer. I'll actually see where is the patient ID. I'll see the address line over here, and it shows me over here. This is the field that you need to fuzz. All right. And that is how you actually fuzz fields. If someone comes to you and tells you that, oh, we can fuzz this protocol, be a little careful. The other thing is with vendors is they would send a very big file and they would expect the other guy to crash with it, which rarely happens. I have not seen any good crashes with that kind of a scenario. There are crashes, but not the ones that I want. All right, let's talk of the defense, and we'll talk of some interesting scenarios. Uh, Validate the size of message. Now, this is a very, very big problem that I feel. We do not validate the size of these messages. Uh, the other thing is that you can actually anonymize these messages. So most of the celebrities that I know, like I don't know celebrities, but when they visit hospitals, their names are not on the files. They keep a pseudo name for them. Right? This goes for any high profile person also, but unfortunately this is only for them, right? So there are ways of anonymizing patient data, or at least removing the PII, and if you're pen testing, just look at that if you can enforce all of this. Enforce two-way. Interestingly, all of these messages can be implemented on TLS. The reason why hospitals do not opt for it is the cost of maintenance, and this is like a very big this is a very big excuse that I've heard from everyone. They're like, who will maintain these kind of messages? What do we do with it? And all of these protocols, all of these devices can enforce TLS, but they're not. All right. Now with the HIPAA Act and the FDA actually cracking down on US hospitals, you expect a lot of audits for these kind of mistakes. Earlier they were relaxed, and now with the ransomware attacks, it'll be more. Uh, have a two-way TLS, unvalidated file downloads. Okay, so this is one of the interesting scenarios. Uh, there is a message that goes like this. Where is that message? RDE message. Right. If you can see it here, I'll just pull out. So the way these protocols work is, if you go to a hospital and you order a test, let's say your X-ray test, the test comes in a form of image or a PDF file, which is kept over a server, right? And the HL7 message actually tells that guy to pick that file from there and give it back to you. If you change that file, you can actually fetch resources from Google. And I'm not joking. This is something that happened. I was talking to someone from the field, and they said that a doctor needs access to Facebook because he gets bored in the evenings, and so you have in the end an MRI machine which has access to Facebook, and this is a really common thing that happens because they don't really care about cybersecurity. So yes, so you can actually create those kind of fields and do an LFI, local file inclusion, and you can fetch resources from the internet. Uh, Finally, uh, have a again. Let's talk about FHIR. This is important. Uh, FHIR is the next version of what I'd say HL7. And the way it will work is it will replace all of these messages with good JSON content. But the problem right now is that companies find it really hard to migrate on all of it. So they have FHIR implemented, but they are wrappers around HL7. So you'll see HTTP request with HL7 header, which is this big, and then it has vulnerabilities that is there on mobile devices, and then with this protocol also. So which is really interesting. Um, Again, the call for proposals for FHIR is a really strong group. So if you really think that there's a problem, do contact them, and they'll put it in practice. I was really happy that this happened. Okay, finally, secure network firewall for both ingress and egress filtering. Understand your network and your devices code, and this is important because many of these vulnerabilities happen because the vendors did not realize that they were running Windows XP. Like this was scary for me because the hospital vendors thought like the patient device. I was talking to someone and they said, "Oh, this is a proprietary OS." And after investigating much into it, I realized they had just changed the wallpaper on that guy. It's like so this doesn't happen like, but once a blue moon this happens. So you know, all right, I'll take questions, and I'll see if I can get some more demos. Anyone has questions? Okay, yes. Uh, no, but what you can really do is subscribe to FDA. So FDA has a weekly newsletter, and I have subscribed to their RSS. So you can always do that. There is research from independent groups as well, but there is no. I don't think there's a centralized website or a thing that keeps track of this actively. There are like everyone has its own set of lists, and they just exchange information. But it's I don't think that you have a vulnerable list. Like most of the vendors that I've seen just get knocked off after a hack. So yes, yeah, I'll give it to them. Yes. Oh yeah. Uh, this is interesting. Can we turn off the computer? We turn off the camera?